So today we're going to be continuing to look at the alternative future of the world. In the previous alternative future video, we saw a lot of stuff going on down here in Southern Africa between the East African Federation, which is now the Central African Federation, and South Africa itself. A large conflict was fought, and at the end of that conflict, we have borders that look like this. A lot of countries were wiped out, and then a lot of countries also grew stronger. But in today's alternative future video, we're going to be taking a look at South America, where barely anything has happened. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. That really helps us out and it really helps us grow the channel. And if you're new and you didn't know, we're aiming for 100,000 subscribers by the end of this year, and we would really want to get there. So if you do end up enjoying these videos or like it at all, make sure to subscribe. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Now, as I said, there's going to be a lot of stuff happening down here in South America, and it's actually going to be an entire continent war. Now, the problem with this is that every single South American country, apart from French Guiana, is a part of the Rio Pact. This also includes the United States, which makes things even more complicated since, if someone were to declare war on someone down here, it would activate said pact and the US would get involved, and whichever side the US gets involved in is most likely going to win. So we have it getting a little complicated. So to start off, we have several countries leaving the Rio Pact in order to form their own South American alliance. These countries include Argentina, Paraguay, Bolivia, Peru, and Suriname. Now the rest of South America stays within the Rio Pact, and all of these countries are relatively close together when it comes to unity, and a lot of them also hold very close relations with the United States, so they have that going for them. Now the guys that just broke away, they decide to form their own alliance, and this is just known as the South American Entente. Honestly, this color looks horrible mixed with the Rio Pact, so I'm gonna go ahead and swap back over to the normal map, and there we go. So we have an incident happening down here between the border of Argentina and Brazil. But before we get into that, I do have to give some background here. So South America has been relatively neutral for the past 1 to 200 years. They have gotten involved in some of the major world wars, but other than that, not a lot has happened other than Venezuela kind of getting split up and then French Guiana getting independence. But as in recent years, the entire world has been getting a lot more neutral and peaceful, whereas South America has been getting a lot more warlike. It's almost like the two sides are flipping. A German dictator was elected in Argentina who is very, very much nationalistic and loves Argentina and absolutely hates Brazil for everything that they are. And we also see a lot of these mini dictators being elected in the countries that decided to leave the Rio Pact. Now, on the other side of the South American thing, we don't have it being much better, but the dictators aren't as nationalistic, and they definitely don't hate the other countries as much as these countries hate them. Brazil got a guy that's kind of like borderline, like maybe a dictator. He's elected, but we could probably see some Trump stuff happening when his term runs out. So yeah, South America is a very hostile environment, and it's well, it's not going to be pretty. But back to the Argentine-Brazilian border dispute thing. Allegedly, some Argentinian troops kind of shoot at some Brazilian troops. No one can confirm this because it's in the middle of nowhere. But Brazil says Argentina started it and decides to try to activate the Rio Pact. But since there wasn't enough evidence, the Rio Pact does not get activated. And instead, we just have Brazil declaring war on Argentina. And with this, we have the entire South American Entente being activated. So Paraguay, Bolivia, and Peru, as well as Suriname join in. And this is a handful for Brazil. Now, they can easily take out Suriname in the north, and I'm sure they wouldn't have much problem pushing into Paraguay. But overall, the combined strength of Peru, Bolivia, and Argentina might make a little bit of a sticky situation for Brazil. Now, Brazil does have some allies here, but are they really going to join? They don't have a reason to since the Rio Pact was not activated. However, we do have some of them deciding to join anyway. The main one being Colombia, who's allied to the United States. The US kind of says that, hey, we're kind of neutral about this, but we also do support Brazil because the blue side is full of dictators, and they may or may not be funding the red team. But yeah, Colombia joins in, and with this, we have Venezuela joining in. The United States puppet in a way. I'm sure they would join in just because why not? But from here, we have even more countries getting involved, with Chile joining in next. Now, Chile it's not uninvadable, but it's going to be pretty dang hard to get in there. The entire country is a mountain because of the Andes. But hey, maybe they just want to throw hands with Bolivia again. Next up, we have Guyana joining in on the red team. Kind of a given. They're also allied to Brazil and everyone else over here. And now we just have 3 neutral countries remaining. They don't join in on any sides, but if they did join in, they would all most likely go on to the red team. Uruguay might be like a 50-50 split. I don't really see them wanting to be on either side just because they get steamrolled. Paraguay is more like essential because it's a big border between Argentina and Brazil. But Uruguay, I mean, I guess Uruguay could also be useful, but at the same time, they're kind of better for both sides if they stay out because, they don't have to worry about protecting this land on either side. But yeah, let's get to shooting. So the Argentine dictator was kind of preparing for this. they were ready in a way, and they automatically push right into Brazil. They managed to do about this much in 3 days, and this is propaganda. They use it, and they managed to enlist even more people into their army. They're totally not being dragged out of their houses or anything. So while this campaign is going on in the south, we have Brazil starting a campaign into Peru with the help of Colombia. They invade in from the northeast and start to head towards Peru's coast. On the opposite side of the continent, Suriname ceases to exist, and honestly, I'm feeling like sinking it, so we're gonna do that. Back down south, the Argentines continue their advance into Brazil, and now start to push over towards the coast in order to try to cut it off into 2. Now, the problem with trying to do that is that there is a lot of heavily populated cities down here, and I don't think Brazil is going to let that slide. So they start to rearrange armies in order to stop the Argentines from advancing from the south. Back over in Peru, we see another campaign starting out from this angle, whereas now we see Bolivia start to push into Brazil, although this is eventually stopped as Bolivia just doesn't. They might be trying to use that navy of theirs, but just something about it doesn't make much sense. So Paraguay is now having flashbacks, and as they start to conscript even more men, they start to realize that what happened back in the Paraguayan War is going to happen again. We have Chile making a small gain over into Bolivia, while Argentina does the same thing in the south. They make a campaign from this small point right here in order to try to cut Chile in half, although they hold out. Over in the south, we have the Brazilians pushing back the Argentines and starting to push over into this part of the country. Now, if you can't already see what they're trying to do here, then, well, you're about to see. Immediately realizing what Brazil is pulling off here, Argentina starts to withdraw its troops from Brazil very quickly. They all manage to exit Brazil, but a small portion of them do get trapped over here in the panhandle of Argentina, and Argentina manages to lose about 50,000 men. That is a big loss. Probably one of the biggest losses in history. Actually, I don't know, because the encirclements that were pulled off in this area were kind of crazy, but for 50,000 people to surrender, obviously that whole nationalism thing wasn't been working. But going back over to Peru, we have progress going in favor of the red team. They slither along the Ecuadorian border until eventually Peru gets snapped into 2. This part surrenders over to the red team, and they continue to push into Peru. However, Peru makes a counteroffensive, which actually knocks out a good portion of the red team army and isolates another half over here in this angle that they just took. From here, they begin to squeeze in, although their progress is eventually stopped as there is a lot of people over here. Another counteroffensive is made up north that tries to reach the border, although it eventually falls short. And this campaign up here is eventually frozen as the red team starts to push in from the south. Those Bolivian troops that were trying to push in, yeah, they got pushed out. And now Brazil starts this campaign over towards Chile. Speaking of Chile, they expand their front into Bolivia and also start to poke out in order to meet up with Brazil. Down south, we have Argentina expanding its front line into the country, although they don't make much progress at all. Over here on the border of Brazil, we have Brazil taking over all of southern Paraguay and now pushing into northern Argentina, and about half of Paraguay is left. But Argentina does manage to pull off a pretty large-scale counteroffensive, which goes very much in their favor. They even manage to take a little bit of land out of Brazil, but this is eventually stalemated, and the counter campaign continues to go up north until eventually that itself is also stalemated. The Peruvian campaign continues to do well as they now are starting to get near the Peruvian coast. Over in Bolivia, they decide to expand their front instead of pushing down towards Chile because right now it's too much of a risk. Brazilian troops stationed in Paraguay now also start to push over towards Chile, as they see this as a much more viable area to get over towards the country, but that is eventually stopped as the Argentines are ramping up their counteroffensive in the south. That counteroffensive starts to move up again, and eventually the Brazilians are almost pushed completely out of Argentina apart from this panhandle up here. Things go super well in the south, however in the north it's not looking too good for Paraguay. Brazilians enter into Bolivia and now push down and encircle a small army, and this army eventually surrenders. And from here, we can see that the red team has a clear strategy: encircle and kill. A crushing campaign in the north of Bolivia takes place, and this wipes out a lot of Bolivia's army. It's very costly for the red team, however, it is very nice. Chile starts to focus more on meeting up with the north, as well as trying to meet over here with the Brazilians, but this comes at a cost as they start to lose even more ground to Argentina in the south. I'm going to be completely honest with you, I don't fully know the geography of Chile. I know there's mountains, I've stated that, but like I don't know if Argentina would be able to pull this off. Since this is like an alternative future and it's fictional, we're gonna go ahead and say that those Argentines are very skilled. I mean, their dictator is from Argentina, so of course he's talented. Why wouldn't he be? So back over in Peru, we have the red team finally meeting with the Peruvian coast and cutting Peru into 2 pieces. This causes Peru to move their troops out of the north and down to the south in order to reconnect with the southern half of their country, which allows for the red team to make a little bit of gain into the north of the country until they're eventually stopped by defenders. In the south, we have the Peruvians attempting to reconnect with themselves until eventually it falls through and they manage to connect. This separates a division or 2 from the rest of the red team army, and this division is eventually pushed back and forced to surrender. Back over in Paraguay, we have have the red team continuing to kill everybody, while the Argentine counteroffensive is starting to slow down. They eventually meet the top of the Paraguayan border, but this is it for them, and their counteroffensive stops. Chile and Brazil finally meet up, cutting the blue team into two and separating the two weaker countries from the strongest. Ellos están muy tristes. So at this point, Peru is starting to cripple under the might of the red team. Their economy starts to die, and the people within Peru are sick of war. The government made this decision to leave the Rio Pact, and honestly, a majority of the people weren't on board with that, but just because they were kind of dictator-like, they got away with it. Except they don't really get away with it because the people overthrow the government and Peru surrenders. This is a big uh-oh for Bolivia, as they are now being pushed into on all sides until eventually they too surrender, and now it's just big ol' Argentina and Paraguay versus the rest of the continent. Who would have known that Paraguay would last this long? Yeah, I just got a call from the Paraguayan dictator. 90%. Not 70. 90. Paraguay, the country itself, surrenders. However, Argentine forces remain within the country. So as the Paraguayan armies start to surrender, we do have them being pushed back, along with the effects of the massive Argentine counteroffensive. Troops now enter into northern Argentina from Bolivia, and this gives relief to Chile, who manages to push Argentines out of their country. So as the red team starts barreling in from the north, we have Argentina with one last trick up their sleeve. So you know how Germany went through the Benelux in World War II? We have around 200,000 of Argentina's reserves flooding through Uruguay and pushing into southern Brazil. Within a few days, Uruguay is forced into capitulation, and these Argentine forces now continue to rampart up into southern Brazil. Now this area is fortified and defended, however, they were not expecting this and how quick it would happen, so Brazil was kind of left to reorganize their troops on these front lines up here. While doing that though, they become vulnerable, and Argentina manages to slam right into that, push up into the front lines and liberate a good portion of Paraguay, while at the same time they manage to liberate a good portion of their country. The Argentine campaign in the south starts to fade away, and eventually it is stalemated with the Brazilian armies, and that was the last punch that Argentina could pack. Almost immediately, red team forces start to flood back into Argentina and Paraguay. We have an embarrassingly large encirclement taking place up north, which makes around 10,000 Argentine troops surrender, and this fight continues south as even more divisions get encircled. Overall, the logistics of Argentina have shown to fail here, and the armies within Uruguay and southern Brazil are forced into defense, except their defense sucks because they weren't trained to defend. Brazil managed to swoop around the coast and liberate Uruguay's capital, and from here the remaining Argentine forces are forced to flee back into the country. Chile now makes its own entrance into Argentina, and individual campaigns start to take place across Argentina in order to take out major supply camps and cities. One in particular is notable for capturing Buenos Aires, and from here the remaining armies start to go rogue as the government collapses. The people in Argentina start to rise up, and after about another week of fighting, we have Argentina surrendering. So there goes that. Let's go ahead and take a look at this peace treaty. Alright, and here are our new borders of South America. So as you can probably observe here, Brazil got the most amount of land out of anybody. They got land out of all of the countries that were on the blue team. Starting up north, Suriname was split between Brazil and Guyana, although a majority of Suriname was given to Guyana. Then over to Colombia, they annexed a good portion of northeastern Peru, while Brazil got a good chunk out of their east in total. Poor Bolivia was partitioned between Brazil and Chile, and this is pretty much all that remains. And then Argentina lost land to everybody, so they lost land to Brazil, obviously over here. Paraguay used to border like right here, sort of. I mean, I'm not very good at drawing, so there's that. So the remainder of Paraguay, this part was given over to Argentina simply because it would not be able to survive on its own. Uruguay was ceded a little tiny bit of land as compensation for kind of being invaded. Personally, I wouldn't let that slide, but whatever. And then finally, Chile got a lot of land here, so they snaked a little bit further up the coast over here. They got a portion of Bolivia over here, and then they got a portion of Argentina over here. Oh, as well as fixing this horrible mess down here. So yeah, South America finally did something. Let's go ahead and take a look at the new alliances map. And of course, it's not up to date, but these last few remaining countries disbanded their alliance, and they are now just independent and peaceful. Their governments all got replaced, and they really have no ambition to invade or start any wars or anything like that. Now, I do know that Argentina invading Uruguay would activate the Rio Pact. I forgot. My bad. It's just Uruguay, right? Please don't be mad at me. So now that South America finally got that out of their system, they decided to do something else. We have two unifications taking place. First of all, we have Ecuador joining Colombia in order to form Gran Colombia. Now, I know they're missing a little bit of Venezuela, but it's basically Gran Colombia. And then our next unification is between the two Guianas. Now, I know that these three countries here are all speaking different languages, but I feel like they could probably make it work since they're all small like this. They just kind of incorporate their economies into each other, use the same military. They would be able to like get past the language and culture barrier and actually be able to maybe thrive as a country. I don't think thrive is the right word for that, but I think you know what I mean. And just like that, the amount of countries in the world continues to lessen. In Europe, we have a lot of happy things happening, such as the reunion of Czechoslovakia. Now, this only took place because the leaders of these two countries saw economical problems within their respective countries, And you know, they're also pro reunification between each other. Czechs and Slovaks love each other in real life, and overall this unification is a rather peaceful one. The majority of people wouldn't mind this happening. They weren't necessarily in support of it, but if it were to happen, they really wouldn't care. They use the same currency, so that doesn't really create that many problems. There's a slight language barrier, but overall it's not that much different. So yeah, Czechoslovakia is back. And oh, poor Ukraine, you have something that doesn't belong to you now, don't you? Just kidding. They don't care. Everything's peaceful over here. Moving on from that, though, Hungary decides that it's time to stop being an ass, and they kind of forgive all their surrounding countries for doing, you know, the horrible thing after World War One. Like, how dare Serbia take Vojvodina? How dare Romania take Transylvania? How dare Croatia and Slovenia and Austria and Slovakia? I mean, it's horrible, right? Well, yeah, that was 200 to 300 years ago, so they don't care. They don't care anymore, and they start to make friendly relations with all of their neighbors, which is very cool. Down in the Balkans, we have a lot of relations being fixed up, especially in this region. These Albanians and the Serbs don't hold as big as a grudge anymore. It's still there, but it's not as bad as it is in current day. Greece and Macedonia have both decided that, hey, we're separate countries, we have separate cultures, it's whatever. They're now chill. Same with Bulgaria. Bosnia is no longer wanting to explode into a million pieces. And this is probably the good ending for Bosnia. Montenegro is just chilling though. So yeah, everyone's really good and happy over here, but Russia is extremely suicidal. Like, they really don't want to exist anymore. They're having a lot of problems in this area, as well as this area, and these areas. Russia is still trying to rule with that iron fist, however, that iron fist is now starting to rust. Countries surrounding Russia start to call for its release of captured land, as well as a new leadership to take place that is in support of the Russian people and not all about being a dictator and trying to take over its surrounding countries. Of course, the Russian government responds to this with threats of nuclear bombs, and everyone just kind of laughs at Russia. But sure, nuclear bombs are either the biggest threat in the world or the smallest threat in the world at this point in time. Technology has developed so much, maybe to the point that using nuclear bombs is not useful, probably because they have lasers and stuff. But yeah, Russia is starting to kind of change their mind. So yeah, the leader of Russia, who's kind of dictator, they get a bullet in their head. I guess all Russian leaders just have the lead in the head disease. That guy's dead. His political opponent gets elected into power, and he's all for the Russian people and Russia as a whole. He sees that people are disagreeing with his rule. He sees that people want to leave the Russian Federation, and he understands that. So very slowly, reparations are now being carried out. Land that Russia annexed from other nations is now going to be given back. First off, we have Georgia kind of getting its independence. We have Abkhazia and South Ossetia staying within Russia. This is due because of the vote that was held. It wasn't rigged, surprisingly enough, and yeah, they vote to stay a part of the Russian Federation. Georgia recognizes this for now, however, they keep their claims over the areas. Georgia is released in the control of Armenia, and almost immediately, Armenia votes to secede from Georgia. Georgia recognizes us and allows Armenia to exist as a country. Moving back on north, we have Finland getting a piece of their land back. Now, this was a small gain by Russia, however, this area did vote in favor of rejoining Finland, and this kind of fixes relations between Russia and Finland. Not fully, because this guy isn't fully Western, but, you know, he's being nice, he's giving back some land, so it's kind of a win-win. Next up is Poland. Now, Poland didn't lose too much land here, however, they still want to give it back just to be friendly. And this corridor that Russia has over to Kaliningrad is slowly being cut back. Now, I'm sure that Russia wouldn't want to fully just kind of snap away from this. It's a very good opportunity to, you know, stay connected with their exclave. So for now, no reparations are paid to the Baltics. However, Ukraine is next up on the list. Now, a lot of Russia's problems are coming from this area, especially the Kyiv area, and they decide that, you know, Ukraine should probably get a little bit of their land back. Now, Russia is very hesitant to give over this area, and that's understandable. There's a big Russian majority over there. Well, at this point in time, there is a Russian majority. In real life, not too sure, but at this point, Russians have moved over into that area, and it is now more of a Russian majority than it is a Ukrainian majority. So Russia cedes this much land back over to Ukraine, and this overall makes the Ukrainian government happy. Of course, they are still missing half of their country, but they just simply cannot get that as of now. And honestly, Ukraine takes it. You know, them and Russia have had a lot of issues in the past. This is seen as a more friendly approach to their whole situation, and Ukraine just kind of accepts it. So yeah, Russia's succession of land over to the west has begun to improve their relations. Western countries start to see that Russia is no longer the biggest threat to them anymore. They start to look more around the world and see countries that they aren't necessarily friendly with, which is most likely just Iran and Pakistan. And then of course the alliance over here in North Africa, they have a big problem with them. But for now, everyone's chilling and no one has anything to say about anyone. And that's going to do it for today's Alternative Future video. So if you did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like, leave a comment with your input or suggestions, or if you would have done anything different in this video, leave it in the comments. Did I say like the video? You should like the video. Subscribe to the channel. 100K by the end of this year. Share it to anyone else that's a big nerd like I am. And yeah, that's gonna do it for today. So I will see you guys in the next video.